Hello, all. Welcome to Demo Words Podcast. My name is P.A. Clark, and we have some wonderful, exciting episodes for you. The first one is going to be on melanin. Let's take a look. What is melanin? What is melanin doing in our bodies? And why do we have melanin? So I'll start with the name of the word. Melano comes from a Greek term meaning black, meaning dark. However, the N is for just a substance. So melanin is blackness of a substance within the skin. And so you can see that from years beyond, we were questioning what is this dark pigment to the skin and what is the light pigment. Well, we found out there's no light pigment. White skin is the absence or the reduced quantity of melanin in the skin. So what about albinos? Well, albinos doesn't necessarily mean you have zero melanin. You have a greatly reduced production of melanin in the skin. Some of them may be closer to zero. Zero is when we see vitiligo. Vitiligo is white patches on the skin as opposed to the juxtaposition of the darker skin. And the highest amount of albinos by culture and country is in sub-Saharan Africa. So we do have many albinos within the black communities. However, you can find them in all different communities. We're going to move just on to where melanin is made. Now let's look at our skin. Let's take a very small portion of our skin and say within that portion we have thousands of melanin producing factories. Now these are the cells and they're called melanocytes. Melanocytes package the melanin in a package called melanosomes. So the melanocytes would then send those melanosomes that house or host the melanin to the basal layer of the skin and releases this melanin to the surface in response to injury. So that's what it is. Melanin is our body's shield to protect our skin from injury. What kind of injury? Well, the sun. The sun is a huge giant ball of radioactive energy that penetrates the skin and damage our DNA. Melanin blocks that. So that's our superpower. Melanin stops us from frying to death. That is our superpower. Now, what's the next role of the melanin? Besides being a shield, it's also a scavenger. Melanin is a scavenger that sucks up the radioactive, the waste material from cell production, from oxidative stress. I know some of these terms may be new to you. Some of them are a little bit on the technical side, but that waste material from oxidative stress means that there are free radicals released from these factories. Remember, melanin comes from melanocytes, which is a small tiny factory within the cells of the body. And in any factory, there's waste products. Some of the waste products become free radicals. Free radicals are little bombardments of particles that damage other DNA within our cells and contribute to aging. So we want to detox the body or remove as much free radicals from the body as we can. Guess what? Melanin does that. So you're getting a glimpse into aging in the black community and brown versus the aging in white communities. And you find that the white tends to age a little more rapidly or a little more obvious. Why? Because of the superpowers of melanin. Melanin is a shield, but it's also a scavenger to soak up all of that waste material from cell production. Why do we want more melanin? We want more melanin to protect us from the sun, but also injury. Another form of injury is high intense energy. So certain lasers we put on our skin abrasive substances from peels and scrubs on our skin, soaps that are harsh for the skin, all of this represents injury. And whenever there's injury on the surface of the skin, our bodies use our superpower, which is melanin, to go to the surface of the skin to help protect the surface of the skin from damage. What does this look like? As the melanosomes open up and express the melanin to the surface of the skin, those are considered freckles in younger individuals, teenagers, preteens. These are freckles. Freckles are spots of melanin in response to sun injury or injury from heat or abrasion or anything of the sort. That is what it's there for. Now, when we see sunspots, what are sunspots? Sunspots are large freckles. And sunspots don't look as cute as melanin because the skin is not the same as a teenager. So the sunspots can also grow. So we don't want too many sunspots. We don't want too many freckles. We like the fact that our bodies are protected with the melanin, but we don't always like the contrast between the darker melanin and the regular skin. Whether you're white or black, we don't like to have that sharp contrast of dark spots in the face. And so we look for skincare products to reduce that. However, some of the skincare products, if not almost all of them, can contribute to increased melanin, which is called melasma. So let's look at white spots on the skin versus dark spots. We know that dark spots is freckles and sunspots and so forth. What are white spots? Well, white spots represent the absence of melanin, meaning that those factories have shut down and no longer produce melanin. And so with white spots, you can have aging white spots or vitiligo white spots, which comes from certain ailments in the skin. So dark spots we don't love, white spots we don't love. Basically, you want to stay away from the sun and stay away from harsh chemicals on the surface of the skin. Now let's move on. Now we're becoming experts in melanin and we're understanding the importance of melanin and why melanin is there to help us and to make us look better and live longer. I just mentioned melasma. Now, melasma is just a congregation of a large patch of brown spots, all clustered together to create a brown tone. We don't love melasma because it takes away from our natural skin tone. The reality is we create our own melasma from different sources. Some of the things that can create melasma is exposure to the sun or too much exposure to the sun. Other things are going to be chemicals applied to the skin. And we're going to get to those very shortly. Why do we get melasma? Hormone changes creates changes on the surface of the skin as well and the production of melanin. And sometimes it boosts the amount of melanin to the surface of the skin. Many times you find women who are pregnant or post-pregnancy or even post-menopause with a change in the hormones getting melasma. And so we spend thousands of dollars to remove this melasma from the face. Meanwhile, the melasma is there to protect us. However, to reduce the incidence of melasma on the face, we want to remove the contributing factors that gives us melasma. And again, that is sun, that is injury from soaps, harsh chemicals, scrubs. That is birth control. Birth control can change your hormones where you can start producing melasma. And then, most of all, there's certain medications that are going to create melasma and also some thyroid diseases like hypothyroidism. You can get melasma from this as well. So melasma comes from many different sources. If we can reduce the contributing factor of those, then we can have cleaner, smoother skin, whether you're white, brown, or black. Here are some good examples of melanin-rich celebrities and the beauty of melanin. And the first and obvious choice is going to be Letitia Wright. So we just put up this image. if you take a look at Letitia Wright's image, you have to appreciate the uniformness and the richness of the melanin within her skin. Now, she is very, very, very protected from the UV radiation of the sun. Remember, the sun is a giant ball. So the UV radiation of the sun cannot damage, or will damage less likely, her DNA in her cells, which means that she would age slower rather than if she had less melanin. So this individual, Letitia, on her front view and image, you see that the melanin is uniform around the entire face, making a very young appearance. I'm not too sure how old Letitia Wright is. How old is Letitia Wright? It's gotta be the 20s. Let's take a look at her side view. Letitia's right side view. On this image, there's not a lot of makeup. This is probably more actually what her true skin tone looks like. Why? I can see some of the acne underneath. I can see some irregularities in the skin itself, but you cannot deny that her skin is uniform, it's rich, and it's fully protected from the UV radiation. This is just a beautiful skin tone color. And we're moving on. Sometimes I just may get a little involved because these are beautiful individuals. Lupita is here. And Lupita's skin, again, she's a slightly or maybe close to the same complexion as Letitia Wright. Her features are definitely different. But the melanin in the skin, the melanin is what I'm focusing on. And the melanin is rich and deep within her skin. And I do love the way that she carries her makeup. I love the way she carries herself. I love the way her eyebrows are done. All of this just accentuates that beauty in her face. But that melanin within her face also is what contributes to her beauty. You can definitely appreciate that if she was lighter, she probably wouldn't have the striking look that she has. And the side view of Lupita is even more interesting. When she smiles, you can see some of the denser areas of melanin around the corner of the mouth becomes a little bit more dense, which means becomes a little bit more darker. So dark-skinned individuals or melanin-rich individuals sometimes have issues with the darkening of the areas that move more. Why? As you aggregate melanin, it becomes darker. That's why some individuals are very, very dark and you really don't see a contrast in the color. But with Lupita, you can definitely see the contrast on the forehead versus the side of the cheeks, the chin area, and along the side of the mouth. Here we go. We are now looking at Zoe Saldana. Zoe Saldana, again, melanin rich, but not as melanin rich of Lupita. From here, I can see through some of her makeup and I can see some of the freckles on the forehead. She also have a few freckles under the eyes and one or two small spots under the mouth. Now remember, she doesn't have as much melanin as Letitia, but she's still melanin rich, which means she will age slower. Slower, but not as slow as Letitia, or not as slow as Lupita. So this is such a beautiful face. The side view on Zoe Saldana, we can kind of see the differences between the forehead, the orbits of the eyes, the front of the cheek, and the side of the face. These are areas that are hit more or less by the UV radiation. So as the sun hits the face, any area that the sun is touching more becomes darker. And this is the intelligence of the body in producing melanin to the specific regions that has more UV radiation touching. This is why sometimes under the eyes, above the eyes, may appear a little clearer than the rest of the face, like the forehead and the side of the face. The front of the face typically gets more of the sunlight, and so it becomes a little more patchy as that individual ages, or if that individual is in the sun too often. So if Zoe was in the sun too often, you would definitely start to see darker patches appearing more, as opposed to Lupita, where you will not see those darker patches. Now let's move on to the men. And here I'm going to take a look at Eddie Murphy's skin. Eddie Murphy has that very thick, rich, dark complexion, but it's not very dark. It is dark, but not very dark. And for him, you can see he almost didn't even age. So Eddie Murphy, I'm not sure if he does any work. I think as a black man, we all should, because it really accentuates our youthfulness. But if you look closely at Eddie Murphy's face, you see some of the moles in the face. He has some freckles, but you can't really notice his freckles because of the complexion of the skin, but they are there. And he has more uniformity of the entire face because he has more melanin of the entire face. So the less melanin you have, the more changes in the coloration of the skin. So no matter if Eddie Murphy stays in the sun for too long or not, he's not going to develop patches. Now, he can develop darker tones on the side of the face, maybe a little bit by the forehead, but this will not be due to the sun. It will be due to either overwashing, over-scrubbing, or using harsh chemicals on his skin, or using laser treatments that deliver high energy to the skin. These in turn can cause darker patches, which are different than the patches from the sun. So the side view of Eddie Murphy, if you look close, you can see some small dark patches on the side in front of his sideburns, but this is not anything concerning because it's easily hidden with a little bit of makeup. You definitely will not see that. So this is just a beautiful face and a beautiful example of melanin rich skin. And finally, the last meal we're gonna have is going to be Idris Elba. Just like Eddie Murphy, Idris have that deep, rich melanin that covers his entire face. Besides his features that keeps him a very handsome man, his melanin keeps his face uniform. But because it's uniform, sometimes it's harder. I can guarantee you that when Eddie Murphy or Idris takes selfies, many times they're concerned about the color because the camera doesn't always discern the darkness and the different shades as well as whiter skin. This is why with white skin, you take one picture from any place and everything's all bright, there's no wrinkles, the filters work great. But with dark skin, it's a little bit different and the technology needs to be updated to make dark skin appear just as great on film. Maybe this is why we didn't see a lot of dark skin on film in the 70s and 80s, because it's really hard to shoot. So getting back to Idris Elba, I noticed there's some small little dark spots on his cheeks. There's some freckling on his face, and there's one or two small skin types. This is all damage from the sun. So even though he has a lot of melanin, he doesn't have as much as Eddie Murphy or Lupita. Because of that, you will see some of these slight changes within his face. The side profile, I mean, this is just a wonderful profile that he has. I'm sure there's just a low touch of makeup here, which can hide some of the sun's defects easily. So even though we have dark skin and there might be melanin rich, the percentage of melanin rich is what is of concerning. The less percentage, then the more freckling, the more dark spots, and so we're going to see, as we can see the difference between Idris and Eddie Murphy. So we said last, but I have to add Terrence in this shot, because Terrence is that kind of mid-tone complexion. His melanin is there. So, however, though the melanin is there, he's of a lighter. So I'm not sure if, well, I am sure Terrence have mixed culture in his blood, and that's why his skin is more of a brown tone. But with the brown tone, you do see, especially on his front profile, that brown tone, if you look in the forehead region, under the eyes, and the side, you can see a slight change in the coloration. But I guarantee you that Terrence Howard's face was much lighter when he was younger. Over time, with increased exposure to the sun over the years, which increases the dosage, melanin production ramps up. And as melanin production ramps up, the skin becomes slightly darker and darker over time and over age. It's unlikely to find a dark individual becoming lighter over time unless he or she is not in the sun as much. But if they're every day in the sun, 15, 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, you would find that that skin darkens over time, which also can bring a beautiful a richness and luminosity to the surface of the skin as that's getting darker. We also look at the tanning of the face. So black individuals also undergo tanning. And tanning, with myself, when I do get a tan, my skin becomes a little bit more on the red side. So I get that rich redness. And sun tanning, the effects of it and what we see is sun damage. So that's the damage that the skin has to repair. So whenever you're suntan, your DNA has undergone so much damage that your body is fighting to repair this damage. As your body is fighting to repair this damage, you get that red tone or red-brown surface coating that slowly heals over time. And repeated exposure to the sun more than 15-20 minutes a day increases the chance of more DNA destruction and more DNA repair, and that's where we start finding skin cancer, squamous cell carcinoma, basal cell carcinoma, and so forth. Cancer occurs from the repeated cells having to repair themselves, which leads to some changes in the transcription of the DNA. As this transcription occurs and the errors are occurring in the transcription, we get cancer or tumors or growths within the areas that are abnormal. So this is why we don't want too much sun in the face. It's really not a great thing for us. The sun feels great, but I will tell you, please stay away from the sun. Use a sunblock if you can, and if you do use a sunblock, I would end with this: if you do use a sunblock, make sure it's a physical sunblock which has titanium and zinc to protect that lovely melanin from creating melasma, dark spots, larger freckles, or sunspots. So that's it for this episode on melanin, melanin-rich skin, and some celebrities sporting this superpower melanin. Don't forget to subscribe to our station for new updates and new episodes.